Hi, and welcome back to the channel, Biblical Mysteries. My name is Dr. Rich Sorensen, and I'm your host for this channel. And in this video series, we're discussing the ancient aliens. And as we proceed with this topic, I'll be referring to many resources that you may want to check out for yourself. This video is based on papers I've written, which footnote all the references, so there are links to the papers in the description box. Well, the first three videos in this series provide background on the sons of God, what they did, and how they corrupted the ancient world. So in this video, we will consider God's response, which was the Great Flood. Now, there are stories and legends of a catastrophic flood in almost every society. Anthropologists have cataloged hundreds of ancient flood stories from all over the world, from the ancient Babylonians to the Australian Aboriginals. And some of these are similar to the Genesis narrative, including details such as an angry God and 8 people who survived the flood in a boat. However, the Bible presents the Great Flood not as a legend or as a story, but as a historical event that brought disaster to the world at that time. Now, the idea of God bringing destructive judgment on society is difficult for some people to accept. Many feel, aren't we all the children of God? And doesn't God love everyone? Why would God be so mean? And others have Darwinist and uniformitarian views that reject God altogether. Therefore, people try to mock and disprove the flood, as the following biblical passage states. Know this, first of all, that scoffers will come in the last days with their scoffing, following their own desires. They will say, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they have been from the beginning of creation. But they deliberately overlook this fact, that the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. By the same word, the heavens and the earth that now exist are stored up for fire. Now God is loving, but also just, and therefore the actions of both angels and humans will be brought into judgment, whether they like it or not. Both demons and humans may live in denial, and the demons may try to convince us that divine judgment is a fiction. But at the end of time, each individual will give an account of his or her life and deeds to God. But before continuing with the flood narrative, I want to return briefly to the era of the sons of God and consider some new research on one of the megalithic sites that we discussed then. The carvings and the symbols on the stones at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey have long mystified researchers. Are they pictures of hunting, daily life, some form of religious worship, dating and chronology? But recently, the symbols and their placement have been analyzed with an AI-based system to determine their meaning and significance. The tentative conclusion is that a message describing a partial destruction of the earth by the fire of comets, and one or more may have hit the earth in ancient times, as well as a prediction that comets may strike the earth again in the future. So, the communication in the stones seems to be one of warning to scientists that they must be aware of the approach of celestial objects. However, if the structures at Göbekli Tepe were constructed under the aegis of the demonic sons of God, as suggested in the previous video, then the warning message may have a different purpose. Rather than alluding to the flood and to the past and future judgment of God, the message may instead seek to eliminate any reference to divine activity, instead focus us purely on scientific issues related to end-time events, such as we are seeing now. For example, global warming, volcanoes, destructive storms, and so forth. Now, given that the demons are engaged in a cosmic war against God, this could be a form of scientific propaganda and a subtle means of disinformation. But let's return now to the flood. The Bible is the only source that provides the details on what actually took place. And here is a biblical description of Jehovah's rationale and plan for dealing with what the sons of God had done and how they had corrupted humanity and the world. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the peoples of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now for a long time, God had sent warnings through Noah and others of how bad people were becoming, but the warnings were ignored. So in effect, what happened is that the cancer of evil in the world had become so great and so irreversible that the only solution was radical surgery. So Noah was instructed to build a huge boat that was large enough to accommodate his family and the animals that would be saved from the evil of those times. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight. It was full of violence, and God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch, inside and out. And this is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. And put a door in the side of the ark, and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I am going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark. You and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. And you are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. And you are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. And Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Now Methuselah, who was Noah's grandfather, was the longest lived man in the Bible. And his name means, his death shall bring. And he died shortly before the flood, and possibly in the same year. Here's the biblical account. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And for 40 days the flood kept coming up on the earth. As the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth, and the waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on the land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swam over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. And every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped out from the earth. And only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. And the waters flooded the earth for 150 days. Now, some people allege that the flood was purely local, but the biblical account seems to state that it was worldwide, at least in its destructive effects. Number 1, Jehovah states that he will wipe out all people and animals. Number 2, the result was universal destruction. Every living thing that moved on the land perished, and everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground, and the birds were wiped out from the earth. And only Noah was left, and those with him on the ark. And number 3, the mountains were covered to a depth of over 20 feet, 15 cubits according to the biblical account. And note that the mountains may not have been as high then as they are now, and this may only be in reference to the mountains in the Middle East. We don't know for sure. Now, many geologists mock the idea of a universal flood, but they may very well be correct, because the destruction of all life forms on Earth would not have required a worldwide flood. And the Bible does not say that the waters covered every land area on the Earth. And as in the case of contemporary tsunamis, life may have been destroyed by hurricane-force winds or other extreme geological activities that accompanied the flood. If so, perhaps only a smaller area of the world was covered with water, but the results were still catastrophic. And the destruction was not merely due to normal rainfall. It's speculated that the Earth was previously surrounded by a vapor canopy, which would have made temperatures more moderate around the entire planet. Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 through 6 states, "For the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, for there was no man to till the ground, but a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." And that indicates that the pre-flood climate and atmospheric conditions were very different from today. And if the flood was initiated by a drop in atmospheric temperature, then the vapor canopy would have collapsed, causing catastrophic precipitation. But this may well have been accompanied by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, both on land and under the seas. In the words of Genesis, all the springs of the great deep burst forth. At some point in the Earth's history, the land surface was larger and the land was much more contiguous. For example, Africa and South America were joined, and this is referred to as Pangaea. And perhaps there were channels or rivers separating what are now continents, and which were at the edge of the tectonic plates. It is speculated that this was the condition of the world prior to the flood. If so, the people living at that time, including the sons of God and the Nephilim, would have been able to more easily reach all parts of the world. The tectonic plates of the Earth moved apart, resulting in the separations of the landmass into continents, and this would have been enormously destructive, especially at the edges of Pangaea, which presumably were the current continents of North America, South America, Asia, Australia, and Antarctica. If what is now the Middle East was located near the original center of Pangaea, then that area would have suffered less physical damage and would have been primarily affected by the water level. The ice age that created glaciers was a natural consequence of the flood. Gigantic earthquakes caused large cracks in the Earth's crust, explosively releasing subterranean water and triggering intense volcanic activity. Volcanoes spewed ash into the atmosphere, which acted as an anti-greenhouse effect, reflecting solar radiation and drastically cooling the Earth. In the western United States alone, there are more than 68 different ash falls, mostly coinciding with the Ice Age. But the real key to the flood-generated Ice Age was the large amount of water vapor in the atmosphere from the relatively warm waters. The cooling atmosphere would have generated large amounts of precipitation that fell as snow on land areas in the higher latitudes, especially as the waters receded. This vast quantity of snow in turn became packed into ice, creating glaciers in the Earth's polar regions. The volcanic activity eventually stopped, and the related ash was gradually washed out of the atmosphere, rewarming the Earth, and eventually causing the glaciers to recede. Beneath the Arctic and Antarctic ice sheets are sediment layers containing fossils of subtropical rainforests, complete with palm and macadamia trees. And despite the contention from some geologists that there have been multiple ice ages, there was probably only one. Now here is a partial list of geological evidence for a destructive flood that by its accompanying effects caused worldwide devastation. Number 1. In order for fossils to be formed, the plant or animal must be buried very quickly by a catastrophic event. In normal conditions, animal bodies will rot and decay after death, or be consumed by predators. For example, dead fish in water will disintegrate in less than a week. However, most fossils are found in quote-unquote fossil graveyards, in which a violent catastrophic event threw animals together in a helter-skelter fashion, causing many of them to be killed at the same time and buried next to or on top of each other. And this was the case for both land and sea animals. For example, the Karoo Formation in South Africa, which is over 150,000 square miles, contains fossils of millions of animals. There are even fossilized jellyfish, animals in the act of giving birth, and fish in the act of eating other fish. Number 2. The fossil graveyards contain animal remains from widely different habitats that were thrown together into a disorganized mess. For example, the Ashley beds contain the remains of both land and sea animals, including dinosaurs, whales, sharks, elephants, and many others. Another bed containing numerous fossil fish extends over several states in the southwestern United States. In Brazil, fish fossils are found with the skin, muscles, and organs all preserved, and with the fish looking as if they had just been caught, but they're petrified and as hard as stone. And these fossils are abundant, distributed over several thousand square miles and found on a large plateau, which is well above sea level and 500 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. From Utah and Colorado north to Alberta and Saskatchewan in Canada, thousands of dinosaurs are found in beds, such as the Morrison Formation, Dinosaur National Monument in Utah, that displays many dinosaur skeletons. And the Agate Fossil Beds National Monument has numerous fossil mammals jumbled together. The city of Cincinnati, Ohio, in the middle of America, sits on top of a great mass of sea animals. Marine fossils have been found in virtually every mountain range in the world, and even on the heights of the Himalayas. There are sea animal fossils at the top of Mount Everest. Number 3. Fossils are typically found in sedimentary rocks, in other words, rocks deposited by water, and these occur around the entire Earth. Number 4. In America, there have been many dinosaur footprints found in which the animals were apparently trying to escape from a looming catastrophe. The Coconino Sandstone in Arizona is noted for its large number of fossilized footprints, usually in sequences called trackways. And it has been shown that the fossil tracks were made underwater. They suddenly stopped, presumably when the animal was overwhelmed and drowned. Number 5. Many land areas in the world have large sections of sedimentary rocks which would have been deposited by the flood. The Grand Canyon is an excellent example. Just like the canyons at Mount St. Helens, which were formed in a few weeks, the Grand Canyon was likely formed in a short period of time. Evidence for this is that similar sedimentary rocks and fossils are found in both the top and the bottom layers, and there is no evidence of erosion between the layers of the sediment. The red wall, quote unquote, the Grand Canyon, can be traced for thousands of miles, extending north all the way to Canada, east to Niagara Falls in New York, and to the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky. Another example of large-scale sedimentary rock formations is the chalkboards that form the famous White Cliffs of Dover in southern England, which trace all the way to Turkey and Egypt. Number 6. Sediment and boulders have been moved huge distances by a catastrophic force. For example, the sand grains in the Navajo sandstones come from the Appalachian Mountains, all the way across North America. There are also many enormous boulders throughout northwestern America and western Canada, which are around 300 miles from the nearest source of quartzite. Number 7. It was conjectured that the now saline Black Sea was once an isolated freshwater lake, surrounded by farmland, until it was flooded by an enormous wall of water from the rising Mediterranean Sea. The force of the water supposedly swept away everything in its path. Robert Ballard, the man who discovered the Titanic, was fascinated with this idea and found an ancient shoreline 400 feet below the surface of the Black Sea. evidence for the validity of this theory. Number 8. Genesis 9 indicates that, quote, the fear and dread of mankind would substantially be on all animals, whereas previously this may not have been the case. Therefore, dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex, which presumably would have had no fear of people, may have all died in the flood. So, as evidenced by the dinosaur fossil graveyards mentioned above, the extinction of the dinosaurs was probably caused by the flood, rather than by a meteor hitting the Earth. Number 9. Geological studies of Egypt show that there was a period of truly extraordinary Nile flow in the past, called the time of the quote-unquote wild Nile. The river turned into a raging torrent that was especially high during the summers, repeatedly flooding to 8 or 9 meters above its floodplain. So vigorous was the Nile's flow that massive amounts of coarse gravel were washed from Nubia in the south all the way northward to Cairo. And perhaps the most important effect of the Nile's rage was that it produced the entire delta at the mouth of the Nile, where the river pours into the Mediterranean Sea. Before this time, there had not been any delta, and this wild Nile period in Egypt probably occurred at the end of the Ice Age in the Middle East, due to snowmelt from the mountains in Africa. The climate was warmer in that region, so the Ice Age ended there long before it ended elsewhere. The Giza Plateau region is now a desert, but was formerly lush and green as a result of the so-called Saharan wet period, which in turn was caused by the flood and its aftermath, or so it is thought. Now, the Bible states that the Ark of Noah eventually came to rest, not on Mount Ararat, but rather on the mountains of Ararat. And these are located in eastern Turkey. In other words, the specific landing place of the Ark was not identified in the Bible. However, there is a site that's around 18 miles south of Mount Ararat that's known as Darupanar, which may be the place where Noah's Ark came to rest. It is a boat-shaped formation around 2,000 meters above sea level and around 540 feet long and 100 feet wide, which are the approximate dimensions of the biblical Ark, which was 300 cubits by 50 cubits. It was first photographed in 1959 and touted as a possible location for the Ark, but was not investigated in detail until Andrew Jones and his team began working on it in 2021. They have used ground-penetrating radar and have reportedly identified a 3-decked vessel with internal corridors and rooms similar to the biblical destruction of the Ark, around 20 feet under the surface of the ground. Jones stated that these results depict a man-made structure under the surface that is not consistent with rock or mud flow. Furthermore, the soil composition from outside versus inside the area are significantly different, with twice the amount of organic material for the inside area, and which seems to come from rotting wood. Also present are marine deposits that were carbon dated to between 3000 and 5000 BC. Now, all of the research to date has been non-destructive, but the team plans to drill holes down to the level of the structure and possibly insert cameras into open areas to further explore the structure. If this site is actually the location of Noah's Ark, and if the carbon dating process eventually returns a date around 3500 BC, then it will demonstrate that the biblical dates from Genesis were correct, and other dating may have to be updated. And of course, history moved on from that point, and we'll cover the next major event in the next video. If you like this channel, please click on the like and share buttons. If you want to see more videos from this channel, please click on the subscribe and notify buttons. Thanks for watching.